Hello, and welcome to Stumbling Forward, a podcast about real people and the failures, spiritual awakenings, life changes, and lessons learned that shape them into who they are today. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Stumbling Forward. I am your host, Erica Taylor Beck, and today we are meeting with Daniela Huber. Daniela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Daniela. I'm from Switzerland. I'm a shaman. I'm a Kabbalah apprentice also. And I work a lot with people in leadership who are already in leadership or they're creating a team. They're at the point where they're just stepping in.
Lovely to have you. So thank you for joining. So you said that you work with people in leadership, but you are a shaman. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into shamanism?
Yes. So they say you're born a shaman if you end up being one. So that's not really something that you learn like any other profession in the world. And that was true to the extent that since my birth, I grew up Christian. I was raised fundamentalist Christian actually, but since I was little, I communicated with the plants, with the animals, did like little ceremonies for myself sometimes. Like I would write letters and then burn them to create space in my life, like intuitively. And I had what they call the vivid imagination, which in shamanism is actually an ability. It's psychic. It can be psychic. So for a long time, until I was about 30 years old, I didn't actually know what shamanism was. And then I was guided onto my first shamanic journey in a yoga class, and there I met my spirit animal, and my spirit animal was like, hey, break free, do your thing, you're one of us. It was a horse actually, and I did that. And I moved from Switzerland to the States. I lived in New Mexico, gave birth to my son there, and I started learning first from Native Americans in North America, and then Peruvian shamanism, and then Essene shamanism, and now I'm initiated into the Kero tribe. And I'm getting initiated into the Kabbalah by a shaman as well. So that's the big story.
Wow. So you didn't really get into it officially until you were about 30. What were you doing before you really had your big breakthrough?
Yeah, sometimes I ask myself the same question, like, what was I doing? No, but on a practical level, I was a tailor. I did an apprenticeship as a tailor. Then I went to arts college and I went to university and I studied literature and film. I financed all my studies myself by working in bars and restaurants, and then also as a journalist and as a copywriter. And I traveled a lot. I lived in Peru, I lived in India, I lived in the States. I traveled all across Europe, all everywhere through Asia. The
Wow.
Middle East. That was where I invested all my money before I had a child.
That's incredible. Most people don't get a chance to do even a fraction of that type of travel, and that's beautiful that you got a chance to go and live in all these different places. Um, so
It's valuable.
yes, that's incredible. I admire that. And actually, I would love to have been able to do something like that at some point. You had your kind of your big breakthrough around 30, and you had a spirit animal, which was a horse. When that happened, how did you know to trust it? If that was something that you hadn't really experienced before, how did you know to listen to that and then really trust and go with that?
I love that question because it's a question that I get from so many people where they question themselves. And they're like, how can I trust that what I see is real, It's a different physical somatic sensation if you think of something and you imagine something, or if you actually go into the unseen realm. It's like a completely different sensation. Like when you see ice, you feel cold and you might feel goosebumps, you might smell the ocean, and it's actually a really somatic experience. And you also realize if you're surprised because something comes where you're like, no, I didn't think that. That wasn't my first go to. And that's also in the healing sessions, it's really important to me. And I know with every healing session that I give, by the end, I'm going to be in a place that I could not have imagined before with this client. And that's how I know we're really doing the real deal.
That's true. I got into spirituality within the last couple of years, and when I try to get in touch with my different clairs, and so clairvoyance, clairaudience, I always have a hard time understanding if it's real or not because I've always
Mhm.
been very logical. And so when I have these thoughts, I'm like, oh, it's my brain thinking random things. But why did I think that thing? Like I was
Mhm.
completely far off from my thoughts. I wasn't thinking about that at all. So where did that come from? And it takes a little while to get used to picking up those intuitive hits that happen if you're not used to reading them that way. When I first got into it, I thought that when you have these types of messages, they would be more clear. And they're not words like go
Mhm.
do this or hey,
Yeah.
here's this thing. You have to interpret them.
Mhm.
And if you're not aware of that, it's really easy to dismiss them as just random thoughts or things that just kind
Yeah.
of happen. And so how many of us are ignoring our intuition because we don't know how to hear it, how to read it the way that it needs to be read. And do you have any
Exactly.
advice for folks on how to let go of
I
our
know what you mean.
conditioning to do it?
Yeah, there's two tricks. One of them is to train sensing. That's something that I do with every one-on-one client or in every ceremony for a certain amount of time, where you just sense, your skin, your inner organs, your body. How does it feel? Maybe describe it out loud, then go to the scent, the taste, the smells, and you're gonna realize, hey, I do actually taste something in my mouth, even if I haven't had a meal in 2 hours. There's memories in my mouth, and then, of course, like the ears, the sounds, the hearing, and lastly, the vision, because we tend to just really run to the vision and be like, oh, yeah, there's this crystal ball, I see something. But we have so many other ways of actually sensing, and those are the clairs that you were talking about, and we can train these and we learn to decode them. Like, what does it mean if I have goosebumps in my neck, for example? Probably doesn't mean that I'm cold. It's a message that my body is trying to send me. And that's one thing, train that. And the other thing is we have to understand and remember that the mind is a computer, and it always wants to make statistics from the past. So we have to actually use our brain to reflect on our experiences, on our lives, on our opinions or beliefs, but not send it into the future, because it can only work with the past. And give the brain something to do that is really useful, like self-reflection, and not let it try, control, and form the future, because otherwise we're in the same loop forever. Those are the two tricks.
Thank you. That's something that I learned as well is that our brain, it's wired to keep you safe. And so new things like spirituality, since we are conditioned to be in the human form, when you start to get back in touch with your higher self and your original self, your brain is like, no, 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 no. And it wants to fight those pulls to different things because it's like that's we don't know what to do with that. We don't know how to make sense of it. So let's block it and keep moving forward. But it keeps you in a loop. And I really like the way that you said that. And it's hard sometimes to break free, to get back in touch with everything else that's trying to get our attention.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned shamanism and that you learned different types and you went to different places. Is shamanism different from place to place? Is it something, if you had to explain shamanism to someone who has never heard of it, doesn't know much about it, how would you explain it?
Yeah, I love this question because it's just impossible to really explain it. I think I try again and again. Anyway, shamanism essentially, yes, it's different from place to place, but it's actually the law of nature. I also don't really see shamanism as very spiritual. In shamanism, there's no difference between the spiritual world and the material world. It's just the law of nature. And the law of nature, for example, is that the earth is below, the sky is above, and you have the tree of life in the middle. And us as humans, we are representations of this tree of life, and we can connect more to the earth or more to the sky. And then it becomes mythical, but it still makes sense. It's still logical. And spirit animals that give access to the sky are going to be birds and not snakes, and spirit animals that ground you are going to be maybe rabbits or snakes. And it's like this law of nature that has to do with elements, with animals, with plants, and we apply these laws of nature to have better lives, to live more aligned, more abundant lives. Because at the core of shamanism, the way I work, there's the firm belief that there's everything here that we need to create paradise. And it's just us making it stupid and horrible.
We are what's ultimately ruining things.
Mhm.
So when you first got into shamanism, you mentioned to me that you had studied with somebody, had an apprenticeship of sorts. How did you get into it and really come to this calling? You mentioned most shamans are born. How did you dive into that calling?
Well, traditionally, shamans are called out by other shamans, and I would agree on that. It's almost like we're recognized by somebody and they call us in and they start training us one on one. That's the traditional way. It's not through a webinar or anything like that. Not really a school where you apply and you pay a lot of money. The way it happened with me was actually I found a shaman who wanted to work with me because I was not doing well. After the birth of my son, I had a really difficult relationship with his father, and everything was hard in my life. I had problems with money, I had problems with eating, with the sleeping. Somebody else might have been like, okay, I need a therapist. But because I knew so much about shamanism, I was like, okay, I need a shaman. So I found this woman and I asked her if she would work with me. And in the first sessions, she said, you're a shaman as well. Like, I'll help you, I'll get you out of this, but you are a shaman and you can do this, you know. And then she started training me, and I was actually the only person she's ever trained at that point. Now she's taking students, but up to that point she always said she doesn't want apprentices or anything. But then she called me out and she was like, no, this is Daniela, I see she has to do that, so I'll do the thing. And then we did that. Yeah, human to human.
That's great. I loved it. After you finished, she decided to continue to teach others. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. So you mentioned that you work with leaders, and one of the questions I had asked you originally when we first talked was how do you get people in leadership in a very, more corporate dominated and more of a logical industry to work with a shaman, which might seem a little bit more woo-woo or flighty. And one thing I loved that you said to me was that shamanism is not some woo-woo bullshit, that you want to help blend the two. Can you just share a little bit more about that? 'Cause that's what I really want to help get across is that
Mhm.
spirituality, shamanism, different things outside of the day-to-day don't necessarily have to seem woo-woo or spacey.
Yeah, exactly. No, shamanism to me, and the way I learned it, is in no way, it has nothing to do with dogmatic spiritual beliefs where we suddenly have to float above the ground and wear flowy clothes and chant Om or something. Nothing against that. There's nothing wrong with that. But shamanism is very logical, in my opinion. And I believe it's the key to balance and peace. I like working with people in leadership because I believe it's where it's needed the most. And I'm not that much interested in working with people who do ecstatic dance and cacao ceremonies and, they're already like doing all the things and talking to their plants. It's like, cool, you're already doing your thing. What I really like is working with people who actually have a vision, they have a team, they have motivation, they know they're in a place in their hero's journey where they're already actually serving and they're not in the victim mode or in the child mode. They're really like, I have something to give, I have something, I want to make an impact or I want to make money. That's also okay. And I believe that's where this kind of balance is needed the most. And the way I reach these people is usually once I start talking to them, they realize I'm not that woo woo, I'm not like, they realize that their concerns were like unnecessary because yeah, they can go and drink a beer with me too. I'm like a normal person and I understand leadership. My zodiac is Leo and I'm in positions of leadership in so many areas of my life, even though I don't have 100 employees or something, but I can pick up that vibe and like, merge it with logic and also some magic, like some sparkles that we do need in life. And that creates trust, and that's how it usually happens.
Excellent. I like that a lot too. So how do you find these folks? Are they finding you? Are you finding them? How do you even get started?
Instagram for the biggest
Okay.
part. Instagram or word to mouth. That happens a lot as well. And on Instagram, the people that find me are usually the people who they're coaches, they're therapists, they're entrepreneurs who have already been told by someone that they should go and work with a shaman. And then they kind of scroll around and they're like, who would I want to work with? And because my slogan is no more bullshit. I don't do the bullshit, oh no, it's all okay, spirituality. And that's what attracts a lot of people, or a lot of leaders who started working with me, that they were like, yeah, I have a goal, I want to get there, I don't want to fill it all with flowers every day, I just actually want to achieve a goal. And yeah, those people find me through Instagram, and then yeah, others find me through word of mouth, through friends, or for my clients.
Okay. And what types of things do you do? So if they say, "Well, I need a shaman, I have a goal, but I want to reach a higher level," what types of things do you do with them to help them? And I'm sure it's different for each client that you have, but can you share a little bit about any of your techniques or tools that you have that you're using to help folks achieve their goals?
Yes, one of them is, and that's the most potent, is my one-on-one work, where I exchange voice messages from Monday to Friday with my clients, and they get one healing session a month. And what they get through these voice messages is really profound shadow work, because I can track their subconscious and I can show them what's going on behind the scenes. I work with voice because we have to liberate the voice, and so many problems, or so much healing already happens once we're actually able to talk about something without being judged. Then I really encourage them to write down what they want to write down, so it becomes a somatic experience and we don't type anything into the phone, so it's just voice exchange. What I do is I really give them all the tools that I have as a shaman that are safe for them to apply according to which experience they have in their life. So that would mean that I record shamanic journeys for them, that I tell them what kind of ceremony they can do and how they can do it. And then I'm available for questions if questions come up after they did it. And then that's part of their toolkit that they can use for the rest of their lives. It's not something that they can only use with me, or that is like my copyright or something. That's universal. And in the healing sessions, I do a lot of clearing. I do a lot of like soul retrievals, get soul pieces back, trauma work. And I think what's really important, or what makes this work so potent, is that it's a loving container. It's me and this person, and I trust this person. I know they know what they're doing, and I support them in their path. And I'm not a mentor or coach who's like, no, I don't think you should be doing that, and your dreams are unrealistic. I'm like, no, I'm your biggest cheerleader as well. And that's just because this work is in real, authentic love. And that's what makes it really potent as well.
That's beautiful. And I
And
think
then,
everyone needs a cheerleader like that.
oh yes, so very much. We need more cheerleaders, more community. Yeah, speaking about community, I also have a community channel, and that's a subscription-based mentoring program that people enter into a community. It's on Telegram, and there are messages every Monday, every Thursday, and people can ask questions. They can exchange in a group, and it's a similar thing, but it's like a group container, and it's a lot more affordable, of course. So yeah.
Excellent. We'll put that information in the notes as well. So if people are interested, they can check that out. So you mentioned that you help people with their shadow work and helping them to retrieve different pieces of their lives and past lives. As a shaman, are you able to see that with people and see maybe where they're having these gaps or what might be missing or what might be broken that is preventing them from achieving their success in this current life?
Yes, that's the most important part, that I see that. And sometimes it's an uncomfortable part that people don't want to see. Sometimes it's a part that they're not safe to, it would be too painful to do that by themselves, because they might have to address childhood abuse or something like ancestral trauma, including all kinds of triggers. And that's why it's important. I mean, we can do a lot by ourselves, but that's why that kind of work is also, it's important to be held sometimes, to have your cheerleader there and your shaman who's like, no, you can do this, it's okay, it's going to be fine.
When you do that, I guess my question is, can you do that with just anybody? So right now, if you're talking to me, can you feel and see that with me, or do you really have to get into a space where you are connected with that person and do anything to be able to see that?
I mean, if I'm not super tired, or if I've already had like 3 glasses of wine or whatever, I can do it at any point. I could do it theoretically with you, but I don't do that because you haven't asked me for that. And it would be inappropriate. It would be like looking through your emails or at your phone or something without permission. And also on my side, I mean, it takes energy to track and to look behind the scenes, and I don't really, it's none of my business to look into everybody's shadow. And I enjoy also not doing that. But sometimes something comes through, of course. Like sometimes I see someone in the street and there's a dead guy next to him, and I'm like, really? That can happen, but that's about boundaries, and I'm quite discerning about them.
That's what I was wondering was, do you have to do a lot of grounding and protecting for yourself? Because if it's something that you're picking up constantly, I can imagine that would be really exhausting. And you said it could be a little bit invasive if you're seeing that on everybody. And I could imagine the overload of information that you would be picking up. So I'm glad that you are able to block that a little bit and be discerning about how and when you pick that up, because that I could imagine would be
Mhm.
loud, I guess is the best way I could think of to say that. Is just, oh, it's a lot.
Yeah, do you want me to expand why
Sure,
how
yeah,
do I make it happen? Or yeah,
please.
a lot of people talk a lot about protection in the spiritual community, and they think that we have to protect ourselves from the world. But the way I was trained, I wasn't allowed to use protection, because anything that got a hold of me that harmed me meant that I had an opening for that, which is like the same philosophy as, if you get treated like shit by somebody, that means a part of you allowed that. That doesn't mean that we have to continue allowing that or excuse that, but that means reassess your self-worth, reassess your availability to, let's call it bullshit or violence or anything. So it really comes down to the attitude, how I see the world, and my ability to say no to things that drain my energy. And that's the only protection I have.
That you were saying shamanism is different from spirituality, and if you're not familiar with the two, it would be hard to understand the differences between them. And there are some parts that I feel like are aligned, but there are some parts that are definitely different. And I had talked to someone recently where if things are happening to you, the same thing happening over and over again that you feel is something that you don't like or it's unfair or it's harmful, it's a lesson or something that you need to learn that is coming to you over and over until you deal with it. And so, like you said, if something is bothering you, if it's hurting you, there's an opening that's allowing that to happen, and that's where you need to do some reflection to figure out, why am I allowing this to happen? Why is this something that I'm receiving? And then figure out what you need to do to buffer from that so that you have that self-worth and self-belief that I don't need to tolerate this type of thing. This isn't something I need or want or deserve.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I would assume a lot of people struggle with that. Maybe it's because if we don't learn about your past traumas and your ancestral traumas and different things that may have happened with childhood that we block, that there are a lot of openings that we allow that we don't realize that we're allowing. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Absolutely. And it's the problem is that we often don't look deep enough, because we're like, oh, yeah, no, but I do my self-worth meditation every morning, so I shouldn't be treated like shit. Yes, but maybe it's an ancestral thing. I mean, it could be childhood, it could be ancestral, it could have to do with grandparents being slaves, for example, and a wound that is still there, or and an ancestor who's still restless, who's like, no, you got to bring me to the land of the ancestors so you can, so your self-worth goes up again. Or it could be past life where maybe, yeah, you were a slave or something like that. And we've just lost the tools for that, because we just so easily we're given a pill, or we're like, yeah, do your mantra and that's it. And sometimes mantras help or pills can help, but sometimes you just have to go into the spiral and talk to the ancestors, talk to the dead, and figure it out from there. And it's a lot faster then.
Interesting. Do you have any guidance or advice how to tell when that's happening? Because you said sometimes you get a pill, you go to the doctor and you're like, I'm feeling depressed or anxious or crazy, whatever it might be, and we go and we numb it. How do you know when it's a safe thing to invest in and really try to learn, is this a message I'm supposed to be taking action on? If they don't have a shaman, so obviously if you work with a shaman, they might be able to help you figure out this is what this is and this is how it's
Mhm.
communicating with you. If you have not found that yet, do you have any guidance on how to listen to it, trust it, to know that it's a message versus something else?
So, my advice would be, first of all, look into feelings of shame and guilt. And if there's any part shaming or blaming yourself, or, just like this guilty feeling or something, that's what we have to work with. And that can begin by actually allowing yourself to I was going to say numb, like sometimes we do need a painkiller and it's good, because that then de-stresses the body and we can solve the actual problem, or anesthesia in an operation or something.
Right.
Just begin with like, no, I'm not going to feel bad about feeling what I feel, ordering a pizza, watching Netflix, doing whatever I need to do to feel okay. First of all, just really genuine self respect, no shame, no blame, and then ideally look into it by asking why. Why do I feel anxiety? In which situations? What do these situations remind me of? What was the first time I felt like that? And ideally, you do that with someone next to you who you love and who loves you. It can be a grandmother, it can be a friend, a brother, sister. Yeah, that would be my general advice.
Okay. Thank you for sharing
Does
that.
that make sense?
It does. It does. And actually, I was thinking I might need to do that because when you said shame and guilt, those are things that I still deal with and feel a lot. And I'm trying to figure out why because in my current life, I'm like, I don't really have a reason to feel it, but feel guilty about stuff that I shouldn't feel guilty about. And so I'm like, why do I carry that? Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And so I might need to call you after this, Daniela, and talk to you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's worth it to look at your parents and see how do they carry guilt with regards to what,
Hmm.
or something like that, that sometimes helps to not give it to the parents, but kind of like, hey, they didn't invent it either. I
Right.
didn't invent this guilt. It's not mine. It's not theirs. It's like slowly, like that's something that you can do by yourself. But of course, like a healing session or mentoring um, is really powerful as well.
Yeah. And I love what you said about not giving it to them. Sometimes what we see is a lot of people blaming their parents for how they are, what's going on in their life currently. And sometimes it is. Sometimes the parents have actually inflicted some type of harm that, yes, they should be held accountable for that. But sometimes it's that they were doing the best that they could with what they had and what they were carrying as well and what their parents brought to them. And so when you look back, you really can't point fingers because they're carrying their load and they're doing the best they can and they're going through
Yeah,
life for their first time as well. But if you are recognizing that, it's your responsibility to stop the cycle
yeah.
and heal it. So if you're at a point where, oh yes, they had it, I have it, how do we not keep carrying this into the future? So what can I
Hmm.
do now to help fix it, to heal it
Hmm.
so that we can move forward?
Hmm.
And that's a really powerful place to be. Man, I have so many thoughts and questions for you, but I want to be mindful of your time as well. So you mentioned working with leaders. Is there anything that you want people to know in particular that if they had any questions for you, one thing that you really wanted to share to make sure that people heard and knew from you today, what would that be?
Well, if you feel like conventional coaching or therapy or spirituality or just life in general doesn't go deep enough for you, then it's time to call me or another shaman, maybe, but like there's so many tricks and follow your heart, listen to your intuition, to your senses and everything. But if you feel like this is something deeper, this is in a different timeline, this is in a different dimension, then yeah, hit up a shaman.
And is there an easy way to find shamans? Are there a lot of you out there in current business? It might not be something that people are aware of. Are there a lot of shamans out there that are doing the type of work that you're doing?
Yes, but they're generally really bad at marketing.
That's fair.
They have the most horrible websites, no SEO, horrible pictures. There are many, and you can go about it by just Googling shamans and then remote healing session or remote work, and then your topic, for example, childhood trauma or sexual healing or something like that. Yeah, that's a good way to start.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I imagine if you are really good at what you're doing, sometimes the marketing piece is not the priority. Don't judge a book by its cover. Sometimes they have really fantastic, not so much shamans, but people might have really amazing marketing, but they don't have the skills to back up the marketing that they're doing. And sometimes the marketing is terrible and you think, oh my gosh, their website's awful. They must be bad. No, it's typically that they are so good at what they're doing, but they don't really know how to put it out there into the world because
Mhm.
that's not their forte. And so don't
Yeah.
necessarily judge a book by its cover. But thank you for sharing that. You mentioned too earlier that shamans are born. How does somebody know that they might be a shaman? I know you mentioned too that shamans usually tell other shamans and help to identify them. Is there anything that you would recommend and say, like, if you're feeling a certain way, that maybe it's something that you look into, or is it one of those if you have it, you know it?
I'd say if you have it, you know it, and you're probably doubting it.
Okay.
It's not something where you think, oh yeah, I might become a shaman and then you don't or something. It's usually there's like this drive or like this almost like probably when you want to be a musician or something and you're like, how can it even work, you know? How am I going to make money with this? And am I really able to do this? Or like, you know, there's a lot of self-doubts. Usually not everybody, but that's something that is, I would say, just normal. So if you feel like that and there are self-doubts, don't take them too seriously and work with a shaman and find out and see what they say.
And it takes a long time, though, doesn't it, to become a shaman? There's a lot of years of learning.
It depends. The way I did it, it was 3 years. I offer I offer trainings at the moment that take 1 year, but that's just the in-person stuff. They have to work with me before and they usually do work with me after, so it ends up being about 3 years. There are places where you can do it within like 1 year, but you can't usually don't get into these places unless you've done a lot of work before, like years of work of different shamanic work.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's going to be some years, but it's what shapes your entire life anyway. It's not something that you usually have to put time aside for, except maybe to make a fire for a ceremony. But other than that, you're just going to do the dishes differently, you're going to make love differently, you're going to drive your car differently, you're going to pay your taxes differently, and it kind of like becomes one with life itself, which is really convenient.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So you mentioned that you have kind of a group collective. How can people find you if they're interested in learning more about working with you or what you do? How do they find your information online?
So on Instagram, you find me as mountainshaman.Daniela. And in the web, my website is Daniela Huber, Huber.com. And my really affordable subscription channel is called That Channel. So on my website, you're going to see it. It's in the header, it says That Channel, and that's it. You're going to see reviews and descriptions and pictures. And if you have questions, send me a message. My contact info is there, or send me a DM on Instagram. Yeah, wherever, just reach out. But it's
Excellent.
Daniela Huber.
Okay, excellent. And I will make sure to put all of that in the show notes for folks so that you can find Daniela after. Daniela, thank you so much for taking time today to chat about this and share this with folks. Many people may have not known about it, heard about it, considered that this is an opportunity or possibility to work with someone like you. And you don't have to be, like you said, you actually prefer that they're not already somebody who's doing any kind of spirituality or talking to plants and talking to the animals, that somebody who might be a little bit more closed off to it, who is thinking that maybe this is something that they need. So somebody who is in leadership, who has a vision, but wants to work better with their team and wants to get more connected with maybe their higher purpose, it's a
Mhm.
good candidate to work with you. So if it's something that you've not ever heard of or are considering, definitely check it out. And again, we'll have the links below for you. But thank you again so much for sharing that. I think this was a really beautiful conversation and just a lot of really good information for people to hear.
Thank you, Erica. This was so much fun talking to you, and thank you for your awesome, interesting questions. I love answering questions. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, folks, we'll catch you next time on Stumbling Forward, and I will talk to you soon.
see you.
This episode of Stumbling Forward was brought to you by Ori Ara's Self Care Collective. Real women, real lives, and real self care. It's empowering you to take care of yourself one day at a time. If you are interested in joining the Self Care Collective, there are discount codes on the screen. Stumbling Forward member will get you 20% off your first month's membership, or the Stumbling Forward founder will get you 20% off a lifetime membership.